Hello.
So get this, my husband decides he wants a divorce because he's found someone new, but then has the nerve to get angry when I don't fall to pieces over it. A couple weeks back, I was getting ready for this work event. You know, one of those nights where everyone from the office meets up to socialize, relax a bit. I was actually kind of excited for it. For once, I'd have a reason to leave the house and just breathe. Anyway, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, putting on my shoes, when my husband, well, ex-husband now, Gavin walks in and goes, "We need to talk." I looked up and said, "Okay, sure. What's going on?" Thinking maybe it was about the electric bill or something with the boys. But nope. Instead, he just blurts out, "I've met someone else. I'm leaving." Just like that. No lead up. No emotion. We'd been married 14 years, together for 17, and we have 2 sons, Caleb's 11, Micah's 10. So this wasn't just some dating breakup or a casual split. This was the collapse of a whole life we'd built together. Our marriage. Our family. And the strangest part? I wasn't even heartbroken. Of course it hurt, but I felt this massive wave of relief washing over me. I think, deep down, I'd seen it coming. For a long time, if I'm being honest, we hadn't been truly happy in years. It felt more like we were housemates than husband and wife. We only ever talked about what groceries we needed or what the kids had going on that week. The only time we even pretended to act like a married couple was in bed, and even that had become awkward and forced. Still, hearing those words come out of his mouth, him actually saying he was leaving for another woman, it hit differently. I just sat there thinking, so that's it, huh? I'll admit, I was glad someone finally said it. Someone finally pulled the plug. But I also couldn't help wondering, why now? Why didn't we try harder before giving up completely? Gavin sat me down and started laying out his plan like it was a business transaction. He said he'd already lined up some one-bedroom apartment and would move there while we figured out how to divide everything: the house, the boys, finances. He sounded like he had it all mapped out, like he'd rehearsed this. Meanwhile, I was just sitting there nodding, barely speaking, like I was watching it all happen from 9 feet above my own head. Ever get that feeling? Like none of it's real? Like this can't actually be your life because it's too ridiculous? Anyway, when he finally finished his speech, I realized I was already running super late for the work event. So I grabbed my phone to order an Uber because I was done with this conversation and didn't want to sit in the wreckage of it any longer. While I was outside waiting for the car, I got a text from Trent, one of my coworkers, asking why I wasn't there yet. Without thinking too hard, I texted back something like, "Oh Trent, you wouldn't believe it. My husband just dumped me, so I guess I'm a free agent now." Haha. But here's the kicker. I didn't send that message to Trent. I sent it to Gavin. Yep, that happened. And by the time I noticed, it was too late. Now you'd think, given the fact that he's leaving me for some younger woman, he wouldn't give a damn what I had to say anymore, right? Wrong. That message sent him into a rage. He came storming out of the house, furious, shouting about how I was cold and heartless, acting like I'd somehow wronged him. "How can you joke about something like this?" he yelled at me. And I just stood there thinking, are you serious right now? You're the one walking out on our marriage. Did he expect me to drop to my knees and beg him not to go? I tried to explain that it was just a dumb joke, something that's kind of been running at work lately. A bunch of people in our department have gotten divorced recently, so we've been half joking that our office is cursed. It's not personal. But he didn't care about the context. All he saw was that I wasn't emotionally wrecked, and that seemed to bother him more than anything. It was like he needed me to break down, cry, plead. And when I didn't, that's when he really lost it. So instead of going through with his big plan to move out and start fresh, Gavin suddenly decides to stick around. Now he's saying he's unsure about the divorce. And instead of actually talking about it, he just goes radio silent, ignores me, dodges my questions, won't tell me when he's leaving or what his plan is. Eventually, during one of the rare moments when we actually spoke, he tells me, "I was going to be fair with you in the divorce, but now, after that text, I'm going to take you for everything." I kid you not. He really believed that one stupid message was some kind of betrayal. And I just looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You can't take what I don't even care about. I just want out." That's when he snapped. He slapped me right across the face. And let me tell you, I never thought he'd actually hit me. Not once in all our years together did he ever get physical. I was stunned. It wasn't the pain that shook me, it was the fact that it happened at all. This man, who I had shared my life with for over a decade, the father of my kids, and now he's hitting me. Later that night, I heard him crying in the bathroom. Like he was the one who'd been betrayed. And I just sat there wondering, how do you go from hurting your wife to playing the victim? How does that even make sense? I'm 47. Gavin's 48. We've got 2 boys who have no idea any of this is going on. I moved to the couch. I couldn't sleep beside him after what he did. But of course, now he's acting like I'm the bad guy. He won't leave, won't follow through on anything he said. And suddenly he's talking about taking the house, full custody of the kids, everything, just because I didn't cry when he dumped me. So now I'm just waiting. I've got a lawyer and I've been documenting every last thing. Never in a million years did I think it would get to this point. But here we are. It's wild how fast someone's ego can shatter and turn everything into chaos. And that slap? That was just the beginning. I figured that moment, him hitting me, had to be the lowest point, right? Nope. Gavin somehow managed to make everything even more toxic. He started treating me like I was the villain in his little story. Gave me these dead-eyed stares every time we crossed paths in the house. If I brought up the kids or the divorce, he'd act like I wasn't even speaking. One night, I was in the kitchen doing dishes, and he walked in, ignored me completely, then out of nowhere goes, "I was gonna go easy on you, but now you're going to regret that text for the rest of your life." I stood there, sponge in hand, just blinking at him, wondering if he was even hearing himself. He was losing his mind over a single joke. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't humiliate him in front of anyone. It was a dumb little comment, one that wasn't even meant for him. But yeah, here we are, me, standing in the rubble of this marriage while Gavin acts like I committed some unthinkable offense. Like I stabbed him in the back or something. He even had the audacity to say he was going to take everything, the kids, the house, my peace, my sanity, as if wrecking our lives wasn't already enough. So I looked him in the eye and asked, "What are you even talking about? You're the one who decided to walk away." You'd think he'd have something to say for himself, right? Nope. He just gave me this smug little smirk and walked off, not a single word. It was like I was living with a complete stranger. Actually, scratch that. It was worse. It was like sharing a roof with someone who genuinely hated me, and I couldn't even figure out why. Then things got strange. One night, Gavin sits me down at the kitchen table like he's about to pour his heart out. For a second, I thought, okay, maybe this'll finally be a grown-up conversation. Maybe we can sort things out like adults. Wrong. He starts off with, "I've been thinking, maybe we rushed into this divorce thing. Maybe we should try to work it out." I just sat there blinking. What? This was the same guy who, not even a week earlier, told me I'd ruined everything and that I was going to pay for it. Now he wants to patch things up? It felt like whiplash. Like he was toying with my mind just to see how far I'd bend before I broke. So I asked him straight up, what about Jenna? His 28-year-old girlfriend, in case I forgot to mention her before. And without missing a beat, he goes, "I don't know anymore. She's getting a little clingy. Plus, she wants kids, and I told her I can't have any more after the vasectomy." I just stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. So let me get this straight. His shiny new relationship is already falling apart, and now he wants to circle back to me like I'm the backup plan? Like I'm the spare tire in his emotional garage? Yeah, no thanks. But of course, he wouldn't let it go. He kept going, bringing up the good times we'd had, how we'd raised our boys together, built a home, a life. And for a brief, painful moment, I'll admit, I thought about it. I actually considered what it would mean to try again. For the kids. For stability. For some version of the life we used to have. But then the truth came rushing back. The slap, the silence, the threats. The way he'd treated me like I didn't matter. So I looked at him and said, "Gavin, let's be honest. We haven't been happy in a long time. You checked out ages ago, and so did I. We're clinging to something that doesn't even exist anymore." He just sat there, stunned, like he couldn't believe I was the one rejecting him. Then he snapped back, "Fine. I'll move out. But don't expect me to go easy on you when we get to court." And that was that. Except it wasn't. Because right around then, our kids started noticing the tension. Caleb, our oldest, came up to me one afternoon and asked, "Mom, is everything okay?" He's only 11, but man, he's sharp. You can't get much past him. Even though we hadn't said anything, he could feel the shift in the air. I tried to keep it simple. I told him, sometimes grown-ups go through tough stuff. But it doesn't change how much we love you and your brother. But Caleb wasn't satisfied with that. He looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Is Dad leaving us?" That question broke something in me. How was I supposed to answer that? I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to dump the full weight of everything on his little shoulders. So I said, "Dad's going to be living somewhere else for a while. But you'll still see him. He loves you both very much." He just nodded, but the way his shoulders slumped as he walked away told me everything. He was hurt, confused, and I couldn't do a thing to fix it. Later that night, Micah, our youngest, found me in the hallway, tears already streaming down his cheeks. He looked up at me and asked, "Did I do something bad? Is that why Dad's leaving?" That one shattered me. I sat down with him right there on the carpet and pulled him into my arms. "No, baby," I whispered. "This isn't your fault. It has nothing to do with you or Caleb. This is between your dad and me." But how do you explain that to a child when everything around them feels like it's falling apart? And just when I thought I was out of emotional fuel, Gavin comes home from work the next day and explodes. Slams the door like a storm just blew through. Starts ranting and raving about how things with Jenna are already crumbling. Apparently, she's upset that he won't commit, wants to know when they're moving in together, and he's shocked that she's pressuring him. I just stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You left your wife of 14 years, I told him. "And now you're surprised your 28-year-old girlfriend wants a real relationship? Come on, Gavin. You weren't ready for any of this. You should have figured that out before you dragged us all through the dirt." That didn't sit well with him. Not at all. He started yelling, calling me bitter, jealous, said I was the reason his life was crashing down around him. That if I'd just been more understanding, maybe none of this would have happened. And I just laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're blaming me? You left me. You chased after someone else. And now that it's blowing up in your face, it's my fault." He didn't answer. Just stormed out, slamming the door behind him like some sulking teenager who didn't get his way. And in that moment, I knew I was done. Really done. There wasn't going to be some dramatic reconciliation or tearful reunion. This was it. That night, I made the decision. I was going to find a new place for me and the boys. I was going to file for divorce, for real this time. I didn't care what Gavin did anymore. I was done living like a shadow in my own house. He wasn't going to change. And I wasn't going to stick around just to see what else he'd ruin. So I got to work, calling around for apartments, organizing paperwork, talking to my lawyer. Finally moving forward. And, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. I could feel the weight starting to lift. Update 1. So after I made the decision to finally pull myself and the boys out of this toxic mess, things got even more chaotic, mainly because Gavin's moods turned into this wild, exhausting roller coaster. It was like he couldn't figure out if he wanted to play the villain or the victim. One minute he'd act like I didn't exist. The next, he'd try to guilt-trip me with long rants about the kids or the divorce. But let me tell you about the moment everything shifted. One afternoon, I was picking up Caleb and Micah from school. We're in the car and Caleb's phone starts blowing up, buzzing nonstop. At first, I didn't think anything of it. He's 11, his friends are always messaging him about video games or homework. But then I hear him say, "Why is Dad calling me?" He never calls during the day. That got my attention real quick. Ever since this whole mess started, Gavin had been pretty checked out when it came to the boys. So when he suddenly started calling Caleb during school, I knew something was off. That wasn't like him at all. I told Caleb to go ahead and answer it, and the second the line connected, I could hear Gavin's panicked voice coming through the speaker, loud, frantic. He was practically shouting, saying things like, "She's gone, and what am I supposed to do now?" Caleb just looked up at me with these wide, confused eyes like he had no idea what to say or how to even react. I reached over, took the phone from him, and asked Gavin what the hell was going on. Turns out, Jenna had packed up her stuff and left him. No heads up. No note. Just vanished. She got tired of waiting around for him to commit. Apparently, when she realized he wasn't going to move in with her anytime soon, especially with his divorce still dragging, she dipped. Honestly, I wasn't shocked in the slightest. What did he expect? She's 28. She wasn't about to hang around forever while he played sad boy in a half-finished breakup. But the part that really got me? He called Caleb first. Our 11-year-old son. Like he thought dumping his heartbreak on a kid was somehow acceptable. I told him, flat out, I don't know what you're thinking, calling your son about this. Caleb doesn't need to be in the middle of your drama. He's not your therapist. Of course, Gavin didn't take that well. He kept rambling, how Jenna was the best thing that ever happened to him, how he didn't know how to go on, how I wouldn't understand. The irony was unreal. Me? Not understanding what it's like to be left? That phone call marked the beginning of his full-blown pity parade. He started walking around the house like a moody teenager who just got dumped at prom. But the worst part? He began using the boys like emotional bargaining chips. I think he genuinely believed that if he showed me how broken he was, I'd suddenly feel sorry for him. That maybe I'd want to fix things. But I was long past that point. There was nothing left in me for him, not pity, not love, not even anger most days. Then one night, after the kids were asleep, Gavin sits down across from me at the dining room table with this heavy sigh and says, I'm really struggling, you know? I already knew where this was headed, but I let him talk. He went on and on how lonely he felt, how hard it's been since Jenna left, how lost he was. Then he said the words I knew were coming, maybe we could try again. For the boys. There it was. The guilt trip, dressed up as a noble sacrifice. As if dragging our children into this mess would somehow justify us pretending to be a couple again. I just looked at him, stunned. It was like he'd forgotten everything. The way he hit me. The manipulation. The cruelty. The fact that he was the one who left in the first place. No, Gavin, I said calmly. We're not doing this again. You made your choice and now we're living with it. This isn't about the boys. It's about you scrambling to fix something that's already too broken to repair. That didn't sit right with him. He slammed his hand down on the table and started pacing like he was about to explode. So that's it? You're just going to throw everything away? We have a family. I took a deep breath. My voice was steady, but my insides were on fire. No. You threw it away when you chose someone else over your family. These are the consequences, Gavin, not mine. Yours. He stormed out of the room after that, fuming. But I knew that conversation had sealed things. He wasn't going to let up. And I had to do whatever it took to shield myself and the boys from the chaos he was spinning around us. The final straw came a few days later. I was still trying to keep things stable for the kids, school drop-offs, dinners, homework, bedtime routines. But Gavin was becoming more and more unstable. He kept flaking out on the boys, constantly making up reasons why he couldn't drive them to practice or help with their schoolwork. When he was home, it felt like walking through a minefield. You never knew what version of him you were going to get. One night, Caleb came into the kitchen while I was cleaning up and asked, "Why is Dad so angry all the time?" That question hit me like a punch in the chest. I didn't want him or Micah carrying the weight of our problems. I told him the only thing I could, that sometimes adults go through hard times, and it wasn't his fault. But Caleb's not a baby. He saw through it. I could tell. Then, a few days later, Gavin was supposed to pick the boys up from school. We'd agreed on it. But he didn't show. No call. No message. Nothing. I had to leave work in the middle of everything to go get them myself. And when we walked in the front door, guess where we found him? On the couch, watching TV like it was just another Tuesday. I asked him, "Why didn't you pick up the boys?" He glanced at me, barely moved, and said, "I forgot." Forgot. Like they were a dentist appointment he missed. That was it. I snapped. "Are you kidding me, Gavin? You didn't even bother to call? They were waiting for you." He didn't even look up. Just muttered, "It's not a big deal. Not a big deal." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just finished with the marriage. I was finished with him. This man wasn't the guy I married. He wasn't the father my boys needed. And there was no coming back from this. That night, after the boys were tucked in bed, I made my decision. I wasn't going to wait for him to magically pull it together. I was done waiting for anything. I'd already found an apartment. It would be ready in a couple of weeks. I didn't care what obstacles Gavin threw in my way. I was getting out. I started packing little by little, essentials first. Quietly. I didn't want to tip him off too soon. I knew I'd have to break it to the boys eventually, and I dreaded that conversation more than anything. Because I wasn't just walking away from Gavin. I was taking the kids with me, and I didn't want them to feel like I was taking them from their dad. Even though, let's be honest, he hadn't been much of a father lately. Still, I didn't want them to hate him. They needed their dad, even if he was falling apart. They needed some kind of relationship with him, because cutting him out completely would hurt them more than help them. But one thing was clear: I was leaving. I wasn't going to wait for another slap, another threat, or another desperate guilt trip. This was the beginning of the end, and for the first time in forever, I was okay with that. Update 2. Once I had a move-out date and the apartment lined up, I finally had a solid plan. But of course, Gavin being Gavin, nothing was going to be simple. I knew he was going to blow up when I told him I was taking the kids and leaving, but I underestimated just how bad his reaction would be. So I waited until everything was ready, lease signed, move-in date confirmed, boxes halfway packed, before I said anything. I wanted to make sure he couldn't sabotage it. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, I sat him down. I tried to keep it calm, respectful. Just two adults having a real conversation. But that's not how things go with Gavin anymore. So I just laid it out for him. No sugarcoating it. I said, "Gavin, I found a place. The boys and I are moving out in 2 weeks." He didn't say a word at first, just stared at me like I'd told him I was taking the kids to Mars and wasn't coming back. Then he jumped up, started pacing like he couldn't sit still, and snapped, "You're not taking my kids away from me." Now keep in mind, this is the same guy who could barely remember to pick them up from school. Half the time he had an excuse, the other half he just didn't show. But now, all of a sudden, they're his kids, and I'm some kind of monster for wanting to leave a house that's been toxic for months? Still, I kept my cool. I told him, "Gavin, I'm not taking them away from you. You'll still see them. But we can't keep living like this. It's not good for them, or for us." Of course, that wasn't enough for him. He immediately jumped to accusations, said I was turning the boys against him, that I'd been poisoning their minds. And that's when things started to spiral. He was stomping around the living room, yelling, hurling every bitter thing he could think of at me. And yep, he brought up that stupid text again. The one I accidentally sent him instead of Trent. Really? After all this time, that's what he's still mad about? It hit me then. This wasn't a conversation. It never was. He didn't care about understanding or compromise. He just wanted to make me feel like the villain for finally walking away. So I stopped replying. I let him scream, let him spit out whatever nonsense he needed to, and when he finally stormed out and slammed the front door like a petulant teenager, I just sat in silence. Because I knew that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, things got ugly. Gavin started tossing around legal threats like confetti, told me he was going to fight for full custody. And to make things worse, he started telling the boys I was trying to take them away from him. Just flat out lying. So I had to sit them down, both Caleb and Micah, and explain everything as gently as I could. I told them they weren't being taken away from their dad, that he'd still be part of their lives. But we couldn't keep living together under the same roof. Caleb, being the older one, tried to act tough about it. But I could see the pain behind his eyes. He asked me, "Does Dad hate you now?" I didn't even know how to answer that. It felt like Gavin hated me, but I couldn't say that to my son. So I said, "No, sweetie. Your dad and I just have different ideas about what's best for our family right now." It was the best I could offer without painting Gavin as the villain, even if he was acting like one. Micah took it even harder. He's always been more sensitive, more attached to routines. The thought of leaving the only home he'd ever known scared him. He looked up at me with big, tearful eyes and asked, "If we move, will Dad come too?" That question broke me. I told him, as softly as I could, "No, sweetheart. Dad will still be around. But he's going to live somewhere else." And even though he nodded, I could see the confusion swirling in his little face. This was the part one dreaded the most, what all this was doing to them. 2 weeks later, we moved into the new apartment. It wasn't big. The furniture didn't all match. Some of our boxes were still unpacked. But it was ours. That's what mattered. That first night, after I tucked the boys into their new beds and turned off the lights, I sat down in the empty living room, surrounded by silence. And I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't have to tiptoe around Gavin's moods. I didn't have to brace myself for yelling or guilt trips. The silence was almost overwhelming, but in the best way. It was freedom. But of course, it didn't last. The very next morning, my phone rang. Gavin. He was already spiraling, shouting over the phone about how I'd ruined everything. How I'd destroyed the family and the boys were going to hate me for it. I didn't say much. Just let him blow off steam. But then he dropped something that made my stomach turn. I'm bringing Jenna back, he said. She's moving in. The boys need to see what a real family looks like. I almost dropped the phone. Jenna? The girl who left him because he wouldn't commit? Now she was supposed to be his answer to fixing everything? I didn't even know whether to laugh or cry. I said, Gavin, you can't just throw someone new into the boys' lives like this. They're still trying to make sense of everything. But he didn't care. In his mind, this was his grand solution. Like if he played house with Jenna, he could somehow rewrite history and paint himself as the hero. I hung up, knowing this wasn't the end of it. And I was right. A couple of days later, the boys went to stay with him for the weekend, and sure enough, Jenna was there. When they came back, Caleb wouldn't say much. Micah just looked lost. Caleb pulled me aside later and said, Dad's trying too hard. He keeps acting like everything's normal, but it's not. Micah, on the other hand, was still too young to fully grasp what was happening. He asked, Is Jenna our new mom now? That question hit me like a truck. But I kept my voice steady and said, No, baby. You've only got one mom. Jenna is just someone your dad knows. Still, I knew it wasn't enough. Gavin wasn't easing Jenna into their lives. He was shoving her in like a replacement part. And it was messing with the boys. I could see it plain as day. They were confused, hurt, and they didn't know how to process any of it. The final straw came a few weeks later. Gavin called again, angry, bitter, and out of nowhere he said, I'm going to fight you for full custody. The boys belong with me. You're unstable. Unstable. That man, who couldn't manage to maintain a relationship with a 28-year-old, who forgot his own children at school, who once slapped me during an argument, was calling me unstable? That's when I knew I had to fight. Not just for myself, but for my boys. I called my lawyer that night and told him we needed to get ready for a real battle. Because clearly, Gavin wasn't going to go down quietly. And he definitely wasn't going to play fair. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. It was about protecting Caleb and Micah from the wreckage their father kept creating. If it meant going to court, putting everything on the line, so be it. I was done watching him play victim while dragging everyone else through his storm. That's when everything shifted. Update 3. Things took a hard left turn after Gavin dropped that full custody bomb. I mean, I knew he was going to try and make things difficult, but I wasn't expecting this level of petty vengeance. It felt like the whole thing had turned into a twisted game for him. One minute he's reminiscing, begging to fix what he broke. The next, he's threatening to take my kids away like it's some kind of punishment for moving on. At that point, I wasn't even angry. I was just exhausted. But tired or not, I wasn't about to let him win. This wasn't just about Gavin and me anymore. This was about shielding our sons from the storm he kept stirring up. So I did what had to be done. I got serious. I'd already been in contact with my lawyer, but now it was time to fully commit. I wasn't about to let Gavin spin this whole situation into some delusion where he was father of the year and I was the unhinged ex. I knew what really happened. And more importantly, the boys knew. So we filed for a formal custody agreement. And, just like I expected, Gavin lost it when the papers landed in his hands. The phone call that followed? I'll never forget it. He was yelling so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear, accusing me of trying to rip his children away from him, of sabotaging their bond. I sat on the other end of the line, just letting him rant. He said I was unfair, that I'd pay for this, that I was destroying everything. It took everything in me not to scream back. But I knew better. That's what he wanted, a reaction. Some proof that he still had power over me. So I kept my voice calm and steady. I told him, Gavin, this isn't about you anymore. This is about Caleb and Micah. They need stability, and that's all I'm fighting for. He didn't reply. Just hung up on me. A few weeks later, we were in court for the first custody hearing. I was a mess of nerves inside, even though I'd come prepared. I had every document, every message, every piece of proof showing his erratic behavior, missed pickups, emotional outbursts, introducing Jenna too soon. Still, knowing I had the truth on my side didn't stop that pit in my stomach from growing. My whole life felt like it was on trial. I walked into that courtroom with my head held high, trying to keep it together for my kids. Thank God they weren't there to witness any of it. But the weight of what might happen sat heavy on my chest. Gavin walked in looking cocky, like he had this all figured out. Like he truly believed he could talk his way into custody. And honestly, seeing him smirk like that after everything he'd done, it made my blood boil. The hearing was intense. Our lawyers went at it hard. And then came the low blow. Gavin's lawyer tried to paint me as some bitter, unhinged ex-wife. He actually brought up that text again, the one I meant to send to Trent. They twisted it, tried to use it to say I was cold and heartless, that I didn't even care the marriage was ending. But my lawyer? She came prepared. She countered with everything: the slap, the no-shows at school, Gavin's manipulative behavior, his recklessness around the boys. She even read out messages from Caleb that showed just how hurt and confused he was by it all. It became crystal clear this wasn't about which parent was more likable. It was about what was best for Caleb and Micah. That was all that mattered. After hours of back-and-forth arguments, the judge finally gave her decision. I'll never forget the wave of relief that hit me when she said the words. Primary custody awarded to the mother. Supervised visitation granted to the father, pending further review. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. I could finally breathe, knowing the boys wouldn't be trapped in Gavin's mess anymore. They were safe. Gavin, of course, didn't take the ruling gracefully. He stormed out of that courtroom like a child throwing a tantrum, muttering about how unfair everything was. I didn't even bother to watch him go. He didn't deserve that much attention anymore. But just because the hearing was over didn't mean the drama ended. That night, he called me again. At first, I braced myself for another round of shouting. But this time, his voice was different. He was crying. Sobbing, really. He said he couldn't believe it had come to this. That he never imagined things would end this way. And for a split second, I felt a flicker of sympathy. This was the man I'd shared 17 years of my life with. The father of my kids. But it didn't last long. He had made his bed. He was just finally being forced to lie in it. I told him, Gavin, this is what happens when you run from your responsibilities. You're still their dad, but if you want to stay in their lives, you need to get your act together. Click. He hung up again. In the weeks that followed, things started to settle. The chaos began to lift. Caleb stayed quiet, still processing everything, but I could see a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Micah started laughing again, his old self returning bit by bit. And surprisingly, Gavin actually started showing up for his supervised visits. At first, I didn't know what his angle was. Was he really trying to change, or just trying to look good in front of the courts? But over time, it seemed like maybe he was making an effort. At least when it came to being a dad. Still, I wasn't letting my guard down. He had a lot of work to do to regain any kind of trust. I wasn't about to get pulled back into his orbit. A couple of months after the custody case wrapped up, I got a letter from him. It was long. Pages of apologies, explanations, and promises. He admitted to a lot, leaving me for Jenna, trying to shove her into the boys' lives too quickly, and the way he treated me throughout everything. Reading it stirred up a mix of emotions. Part of me was angry that it had taken this long, that he hadn't seen the damage until it was already done. But another part of me? It felt relief. Because finally, he was starting to take some accountability. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I had moved on. And reopening that door wasn't in my plans. The boys and I had built something new. Something solid. And now, months later, life is finally starting to feel normal. Caleb and Micah are thriving. We've got our routine, our peace, and I'm putting all my energy into the future, not the past. Gavin's still around, just in a much smaller way. He's trying. I'll give him that. But earning back trust takes time, and he's got a long road ahead of him. As for me, I'm free. Free from the chaos. Free from the manipulation. Free from the constant emotional tug-of-war. It hasn't been easy, but I've come out the other side stronger. Clearer. And no matter what comes next, I know one thing for sure. I've got my boys. And we're going to be just fine. That's what truly matters.
Bye-bye.